everybody. I'm Lindsay Parr. I am a student at the Colorado School of Mines in my first year as a PhD student. I just want to thank First Baseball Info Solutions and SABR for giving me this opportunity to present this research I've done. I'm thrilled to be here, incredibly nervous, but thrilled to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and show you guys what I did for researching the stolen base. So first, what was the goal of my research? So the goal is to determine when each team should attempt to steal. So when should a team steal in order to gain more wins? Is there a stolen base strategy that leads to more wins per season than the current strategy? And I'll talk a little bit about what is considered to be the current strategy. And is there a stolen base strategy that's better for every team, or should each team's strategy be different? And how successful does the runner have to be at stealing a base in order to risk the steal attempt? So first I'm going to just talk about the data that I used for this. So our data consists of opportunities and attempts to steal second base during the 2012 and 2013 Major League Baseball seasons. So we took data, this was taken from baseballreference.com. We took it from every 10th home game for each team, starting with the 5th home game of the year and ending with the 75th. This equated to 9.88% of the total games played during this period of time, or 480 total games. So for this research, we focused only on stolen base attempts that occurred with just the runner on first base, so no runner on third, and this is because we figured the strategy would be different when the runner was also on third base, so we kept it consistent with just a runner on first. So from our data, there were 7,364 opportunities to steal second base. This was 15.34 opportunities per game. Out of these opportunities, there were 646 attempts. That worked out to be 8.77% of the opportunities. And then out of these attempts, 461 were successful. So what was considered successful is if they either obviously got to second base safely or if they were able to get to third base also due to some type of error. So that was a 71.36% success rate. So I'm going to define a couple of terms, and I know probably pretty much everybody in this room knows this, but it's important for my research, so I just want to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. But first is a base out state. It tells you which bases have a player on them and then how many outs there are. So we have this 1.0.0 as the example, and that means that there's a runner on first, no runner on second, no runner on third, and then 0 outs. Obviously means 0 outs. Run expectancy is how many runs on average a team will score in an inning based on a given base out state. It's found by taking the total number of runs scored until the end of the inning for each given base out state and then dividing that by the total amount of times teams were in that base out state. So we took run expectancy values from playing the percentages in baseball, and this took data from the 99 to 2002 baseball seasons. So what we did is we adjusted them for the seasons we looked at, because in 2012 and 2013, there were actually 13.36% fewer runs on average. So we took all the values that were in that book and we multiplied them all by 0.8664 to get our new run expectancy values. So here's a table showing the change in run expectancy based on each possible outcome of the stolen base attempt with each number of outs. So we see that we have the initial base out state in the far left column. That's going to be a runner on first, and then nobody on second, nobody on third, and then 0, 1, or 2 outs. The next column gives the run expectancy value. This is the initial run expectancy in that base out state after we accounted for the seasons we were looking at. So just an example, the first row under the heading with 0 outs, we had initial run expectancy of 0.826. If the batter were to successfully steal second base, this run expectancy increases to 1.03, which is a gain in 0.204 in run expectancy. If they're able to get to third due to some type of error, their run expectancy increases to 1.284, which is a gain of 0.458. And then if they cause an out, then they lose run expectancy, 0.569 in run expectancy. So that's how that table works. Another thing that we used predominantly was this formula introduced by Bill James for batter-pitcher matchup. So he introduced this formula that estimates what the resulting batting average of each batter will be for any batter-pitcher matchup. So it uses the batting average of the batter compared to the league batting average and each pitcher's batting average against compared to the league average. So in my paper I have, my full paper, I have justifications for using this equation, and it turns out that this was proposed by Fox and Levitt, and it turns out it was really good at estimating the batting averages. It's slightly overestimated on the lower end and underestimated on the higher end, but overall it was really good. So we thought, well, why not apply that to the steal percentage? So we took this equation to a player's steal percentage in order to take into account the pitcher that batter was facing at that time. So here's the formula, and this is exactly the same as the formula that was introduced by Bill James. The only thing that's different is instead of batting average, we have steal percentage. So new bat steal is the predicted batting steal percentage, so success percentage of the batter. Bat steal is his overall steal percentage since he's been in the league. Pit steal was the steal percentage against of the specific pitcher he was facing. And then this league steal was the overall steal success percentage for whichever case we were looking at. So if it was 0 outs, 1 outs, 2 outs, etc. So here's an example of this formula with Justin Upton. I did list his teams here at one point, but he kept switching, so I took him off. So Justin Upton against a pitcher, so this is a league team average steal percentage against of .7278. New bat steal, this is his predicted steal percentage. So his overall steal percentage at this time was .8889. So we multiplied that by the steal percentage against of .7278. And then that .7261 that you guys see was the overall steal success percentage with 0 outs in the data that we looked at. So when we plug it into this formula, we get that his new steal percentage would be .8897. Now against Chris Tillman, who happened to have the lowest steal percentage against of anybody we looked at from the Orioles, he had a steal percentage against of .11 at this time. So when we plugged all the numbers in, his new steal percentage, Justin Upton's, was .2717. So we can see how much his steal success percentage changes based on the pitcher that he's facing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my simulations. My favorite part of my research was I wrote a program in R to simulate an entire baseball game, which is probably my favorite part of my education, was being able to simulate baseball, write code for that. So I wrote this program in R to simulate a baseball game with the ability to change stolen base strategies. So I simulated seasons of 162 games with 9 innings, and then I had extra innings in the event of a tie. The lineups that we used for each team were the most frequent lineups used during the 2013 season, so this was also taken from baseballreference.com. Each of the 2013 statistics was then converted using that formula I showed you guys. So that includes the amount of time that each batter got to first base, got to second, third, hit a home run, his on-base percentage, his steal percentage, everything was adjusted with that formula to take into account the pitcher he was facing. Just a quick note, we only input the stolen base percentages of players who attempted to steal in at least 5% of the games that they played in. This worked out to 7.45 steal attempts per season. Otherwise, we put their steal percentage in as 0. And the reason why was we have players like Salvador Perez, who stole once, and at that time, 3 seasons that he'd been playing, and he was successful. But if we had put that into our code as he was 100% successful in stealing bases, then he would have stolen every time, which doesn't give an accurate representation of what he does, right? So we had to have kind of a baseline there to cut off, and it worked out to 5% of the games. So I'm going to talk about the current stolen base strategy that I used a bit. Obviously, the current stolen bases strategy is random. They don't have a specific, like, okay, steal now, like in a specific situation in a game, right? It's done by either the runner deciding to steal or the coach telling him, or the third base coach or the general manager or something. But I had to define what was going on in the seasons that we looked at. So what we did is we took the percentage of times a runner attempted to steal out of the stolen base opportunities for each run differential and each number of outs. And these turned out to be the 2 significant things that we looked at. It turned out that the people didn't steal bases when they were down by 2 or more runs or up by more than 5. And the up by more than 5 made sense to me, but being down by 2 runs, I think you're still in the game. And it dropped off significantly for the amount of times they stole in those situations. When I researched it, it turned out that there's an unwritten rule of baseball that says you shouldn't steal when you're down by 2 or more runs. So I don't know if people are still following that. To me, a 2-run game is still a close game, so you should try to increase your chance to win. So after we did that, each percentage was multiplied by 270 over 117. So 270 is the total players, and then we divided that by the base stealing players, which worked out to 117 players. We did this so that we had the accurate number of steals per season in our code, since some players would never steal. The code then decides whether or not a player should steal based on these percentages using a Bernoulli trial, so success or failure. If a player decides to steal, his success probability is calculated using the formula I talked about before, and then this success probability is then combined with the stolen base, extra base, and caught stealing percentages for the number of outs to determine the outcome, and that was done using a multinomial distribution. So the purpose of stealing a base is to put the runner in scoring position to increase the chance of scoring a run. So we went, well, why not just steal a base when you increase run expectancy? So we used both the batter-pitcher matchup formula and the adjusted run expectancy that I talked about before, but now we needed to not only include the league steal success percentage for each case, but also the percentage of successful attempts that resulted in a steal and the percentage of successful attempts that resulted in an extra base. And this was because the run expectancy is different depending on where you end up. So here's the example with Justin Upton again. So we already saw in the case where there is 0 outs, a steal increases run expectancy by 0.204, extra base increases it by 0.458, and if the runner's caught stealing, the run expectancy decreases by 0.569. Justin Upton's estimated steal percentage with Tillman pitching was 0.2717, against the league team average was 0.8897, and then from our data with 0 outs, the overall success steal percentage was 0.7261. 92.98% of those successes, the runner ended up on second base, and 7.02% the runner ended up on third due to some kind of error. So using this information, we plugged it into a change in run expectancy formula. We can see here against Chris Tillman, we have the 27.17% of the time that Justin Upton's successful. We multiply that by the 92.98% of the time that he'll increase his run expectancy by 0.204, and then the 7.02% of the time that he'll increase his run expectancy by 0.458. And then we have his failure rate of 1 minus 0.2717 multiplied by how much run expectancy he loses, which is negative 0.569, and we get a change in run expectancy of negative 0.3541. So since the run expectancy decreases, Justin Upton should not attempt to steal in this situation. So now if we look at him versus the average pitching team in the league, if we plug in everything's the same except now his success percentage is 0.8897, we see that his change in run expectancy is now 0.1346. So since the change in run expectancy is positive, he should attempt to steal. So what we did is we compared the average number of wins per season for the current stolen base strategy to the stealing to increase run expectancy strategy. So we ran simulations for each team playing against themselves with the exception of the steal percent against for the pitcher. This was just so we didn't include any other variability. In order to create an interval of average number of wins per season, we simulated using the steal percentage against of the pitcher for the lowest 2013 steal percent against pitching team, which was the St. Louis Cardinals at 60%, and then the highest, which was the Washington Nationals with 82.61%. And that's kind of so we could see the worst case and the best case scenario. So here are the results of stealing to increase run expectancy versus current. And if you look at this table, the way it's read, if you look at, let's say, the Arizona Diamondbacks, because they're at the top, if they use the run expectancy strategy against the low percent pitcher, so the worst case scenario, they win 82.59 games per year against the current strategy, and then against the high percent pitching team, they won 86.55 games per year. So essentially, if these strategies were even, we'd expect numbers close to 81, right? Half the games per season. And what we're seeing is that the run expectancy model increased the number of wins for most of the teams. So against the low percent pitcher, for 28 of the teams, stealing to increase run expectancy wins an average of more than half the games over using the current strategy. The Cubs and the Rockies were the two exceptions. They had 80.96 and 81. So stealing to increase run expectancy and the current strategy yield the same results in that case. 22 of the 30 teams increased their average wins per season by at least one win. This was against the low percent pitcher, so this was the worst case scenario. Against the high percent pitcher, the average number of wins per season using stealing to increase run expectancy is greater than when using the current strategy for all 30 teams, and the average number of wins using the run expectancy strategy ranged from 82.9 for the Oakland A's to 90.49 for the Royals. So that's great, but teams are smart, right? They're going to figure out if you're stealing every time to increase run expectancy. So we decided, well, we need something that would be less predictable. So we introduced a strategy where each team would steal 80% of the time their run expectancy increased, and then steal 20% of the time when it would decrease run expectancy, just so other teams couldn't figure out when you were going to steal. If there's not a significant difference in the number of wins for a team stealing with this strategy versus stealing every time, then this strategy would be preferable. So here are the results for that. This is each team stealing with the run expectancy strategy, playing themselves with the 80-20 strategy. And we can see, so like with the Arizona Diamondbacks, they won 80.19 with the low percent and 81.23 with the high percent. But all of these numbers fell fairly close to 81. The greatest number of wins per season using stealing to increase run expectancy was 83.07 for the Seattle Mariners, and that was against the high percent pitcher. And only 7 of the 30 teams increased their average number of wins by more than one win against the high percent pitcher, and 3 do against the low. So since there wasn't a great difference in the average number of wins, we decided the 80-20 strategy would be a better model. So then what we did is we simulated the real 2013 baseball season. So we went in and we put all the real opponents in. We simulated the season where whichever team we were looking at used the 80-20 run expectancy strategy, and all of its opponents used the current strategy. And then a season where whichever team we were looking at and all of its opponents used the current strategy. That way we could compare how many wins per season they would get with the 80-20 versus if they were doing the current strategy. So we simulated 100 seasons for each team using each of these two strategies. And here were our results. So if we look at this table, the column next to the team name, that's if the team that you're looking at on the row, so for the first row, the Diamondbacks, if they use the 80-20 strategy and everybody else used the current, they won 75.14 games per season. If they used the current along with everybody else, they won 74.28, which was a difference of 0.86 wins per season, which is a 1.158% difference. If you guys look down to the Royals, that was the greatest difference. We saw that if they used the 80-20, they had 80.39 wins per season, and the current, they only had 71.52, so that was a difference of 8.87 wins, or 12.402%. We saw that the 80-20 run expectancy strategy increased the average number of wins for 28 of the 30 Major League Baseball teams. The exceptions were Houston and Miami. Miami only had 2 stealing batters at this time, and their steal success percentages were around 60%. So that's why they had such a bad result. And Houston, I believe, had 4 stealing batters at the time, but their average was around 60% again, so it was really low, and that affected them negatively. So for the teams that it was better for, the difference varies from 0.77 wins per season for Seattle Mariners, and then 8.87, like I showed you guys, for the Royals. So just a quick note here, everything I did here was used using data that you can access publicly. If I were able to have access to proprietary information like knowledge of pitch timing, pop-up times for catchers, speed of batters, that would be really easy to incorporate into my code and make it even more accurate to predict the number of wins per season. But for now, that's all I have. I have a lot of great sources here for the bibliography, and I had to get my plug-in of Carlos Gonzalez because he's one of my favorite players. So, are there any questions? Yeah.
Looks like you were using the same run expectancy regardless of the spot in the batting order, and that's what I believe is the only stuff that's published.
Yeah, it was just, it's the number of outs and where you are on base.
But in real life, if the leadoff batter is on first with nobody out and the 2, 3, 4 hitters coming up, there's much more of a penalty for getting caught than say if you're the number 6 hitter and have the 7, 8, and 9 batters coming up. And so it might be more advantageous to actually still maybe at the bottom of the order than at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I only had access to the information that was provided. I would say that if it's going to increase run expectancy no matter when it is in the game, I would say it would be advantageous to steal, right? That's, I don't know, that's my view.
But the run expect, I'm just pointing out run expectancy might be different in places in the batting order, and which is, but yeah, I understand that data is not readily available.
Yeah, this is all publicly available data. Just a student working with what's available. So, but great point. Yeah.
Do you have any indication whether any teams are actually studying this?
Not to my knowledge, but again, I don't know much of what's proprietary, what people are doing. So, but I haven't read anything about this. So yeah. Yeah, I think part of it, so when I took the average steal percentage against for pitchers, it kind of accounts for whatever catcher they're playing with, right? So like with the St. Louis Cardinals, for example, having a 60% steal percentage against, that probably has something to do with their catcher that they had. So I mean, I think that's kind of incorporated, but yeah, absolutely, I think that they have a great effect on steal percentages, for sure. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Was there a minimum steal attempt for pitchers? Like Tillman, you had an 11%, that's probably one stolen base out of 10.
That he was the lowest steal success percentage. Well, that was the success percentage, so not the opportunities.
Yeah, so was there a minimum number of opportunities for pitchers?
I didn't look at that. No, I just looked at the success percentage against for each pitcher. So when people did attempt, how successful were they? Yeah.
Did you include anything about how possible it is to make a stolen base attempt? So in other words, sometimes a guy will want to try for base, but he's just not able to get a jump. Anything like that?
All I included was the success percentage of each batter. So however successful they are at stealing a base. So it would take it. The ones that get good jumps would probably have a higher overall steal success percentage, but I didn't look at that specifically, no. Yeah.
Yes, I guess off of that, would there be a way to incorporate your model? Like, let's say against a certain pitcher, there's fewer, or if it's a certain pitcher or catcher, there's fewer stolen base attempts because they're better at holding on to runners or something like that. Would it be possible to incorporate that into your model?
Yeah. It absolutely would. Yeah, I just have to put it on the catcher side instead of the pitching side. But in my code, I could for sure put that in. I haven't yet, but yeah, that's a great idea. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.